You're really homeless? Why do your eyes look like someone who has everything?
Because I lost the only thing money couldn't buy.
Then why lie to me?
Because every woman loved my wealth, not my heart. I needed to know if love could exist when I had nothing.
I didn't feed you because you were poor. I fed you because you were human.
And that's when I fell in love with you.
So tell me, was any of it real?
Except my name.
When a mafia boss hides his identity, and a broken woman loves without knowing the truth, the world had been unkind to Juana for as long as she could remember. Through years of quiet struggle, early responsibility, and sacrifices no one ever noticed. Yet despite poverty, exhaustion, and constant disappointment, it never succeeded in taking away her kindness, the one thing she refused to let life steal from her. Every morning before the streets of New York City fully came alive, Juana unlocked her small roadside shop and stepped into another long day. The shop was modest, barely more than a narrow stand with a humming freezer, a glass case of pastries, and a hand-painted sign, but it was everything she had. She wiped the counter carefully, arranged the ice cream, straightened the pastries, and whispered a silent prayer that today would be just a little better than yesterday. At home, her mother lay sick and fragile, her body worn down by years of hardship. Juana was her only child, her only caretaker, her only support. Every dollar Juana earned disappeared almost immediately. Rent, food, medicine, hospital visits. There was never enough. Dreams were luxuries she could not afford, and hope survived only in small, guarded moments. Still, Juana's heart remained gentle. Across the street, on cracked pavement near a bus stop, sat a homeless beggar. His clothes were torn, his hair unkempt, his eyes dull with exhaustion. People avoided him. Some crossed the street, others pretended not to see him at all. To the city, he was invisible. But Juana noticed him. That morning, as she counted the little money she had made, she looked across the street and felt a familiar ache in her chest. She walked over, placed a few bills into his cup, and later returned with a pastry and a bottle of water. She didn't ask questions. She didn't wait for gratitude. She simply smiled and went back to her shop. Kindness came naturally to her, even when life gave her nothing in return. Then Neo arrived. Neo, her boyfriend of 2 years, stormed toward her shop in front of customers and strangers alike. His face was tight with frustration, his voice already loud. Juana barely had time to greet him before his anger spilled out. "This is over," he snapped. She tried to calm him, her voice low and shaking, but he didn't stop. His words came sharp and cruel, each one cutting deeper than the last. "You're good for nothing," he shouted. "A classless, poor bitch." The street seemed to freeze. Customers stared. Passers-by slowed down. Juana felt her chest tighten as humiliation burned through her. Neo accused her of dragging him down, of having no future, no value, no status. He said loving her had been a mistake. Then he laughed, cold and dismissive, and walked away. Just like that, he erased her. Juana stood behind her counter, her hands trembling as she pretended to clean the same spot over and over again. Tears filled her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had learned long ago that the world showed no mercy to broken women. Across the street, the homeless beggar watched everything. For the first time in years, something stirred inside him. Not pity, but recognition. He saw her strength. He saw her pain. He saw a woman who still chose kindness even when she was being torn apart in public. As the sun dipped lower and the city continued its noise, Juana swallowed her heartbreak and kept working. She didn't know it yet, but the man everyone ignored had just witnessed her lowest moment. And in that moment, fate quietly stepped in. Sometimes, love doesn't begin with attraction or wealth. Sometimes, it begins when someone refuses to look away. Behind the torn clothes, the unwashed hair, and the tired eyes the world dismissed so easily, Kwan-Woo existed silent, observant, and deeply wounded. Before the streets, before the disguise, before the cold pavement beneath his feet, Kwan-Woo ruled a world most people only whispered about. He was a man whose name alone could stop conversations, whose decisions moved millions of dollars and ended lives with a nod. Wealth followed him everywhere. Luxury penthouses, armored cars, tailored suits, loyal men who bowed their heads and waited for his command. To the outside world, he was untouchable. But power had never protected his heart. Every woman who entered his life had been drawn first to his wealth, his influence, the dangerous thrill of standing beside a king. They smiled, promised loyalty, whispered love, but their eyes always lingered on what he could provide, not who he was. When money flowed, affection followed. When trust was tested, it shattered. Betrayal became a pattern. Some leaked his secrets. Some sold his name. Some stayed only as long as the lifestyle remained extravagant. Each heartbreak carved something out of him, leaving behind a man who no longer trusted smiles or soft words. Love, he learned, was often just another transaction, one he was always expected to pay for. The night he made his decision, the city glittered beneath him from the balcony of his penthouse. The view was flawless, the silence expensive, but inside, Kwan-Woo felt emptier than he ever had. Surrounded by everything, he realized he had nothing real, so he disappeared. No announcements, no explanations, no goodbyes. He stripped himself of wealth, identity, and status. The tailored suits were replaced with torn clothes, the armored car with cracked sidewalks. The king removed his crown and stepped into the very world he had spent his life controlling from above. The streets became his hiding place and his test. Kwan-Woo chose a spot where no one would recognize him, where people passed without looking twice. He learned quickly how invisible the poor were, how easily people looked away, how silence could be louder than insults. And then there was her. From the first day, he noticed Juana. She wasn't loud. She wasn't flashy. She didn't try to impress anyone. She worked quietly, diligently, with a tired grace that caught his attention before her face ever did. And when she crossed the street to offer him money, food, and kindness, without knowing who he was, something inside him cracked. She didn't see a king. She didn't see a beggar. She saw a human being. For the first time in years, Kwan-Woo felt something unfamiliar, hope mixed with fear. Hope that love could exist without power. Fear that the truth might destroy it all. As he sat there each day, watching her struggle, her strength, her quiet dignity, Kwan-Woo realized this disguise was no longer just a test. It was a reckoning. Because if Juana could care for him when he had nothing, then revealing who he truly was might be the most dangerous move he'd ever make. A king without a crown had finally found something worth risking everything for. The first time Juana brought food instead of money, Kwan-Woo knew something had changed. She crossed the street with a small paper bag held carefully against her chest, her steps hesitant, as if unsure whether she was crossing a line. When she stopped in front of him, she didn't drop it into his cup like everyone else did with coins. Instead, she knelt slightly and placed the bag gently beside him. "It's still warm," she said softly. "I thought you might like something fresh today." Kwan-Woo looked at the food, then up at her face. No pity, no fear, just quiet concern. He nodded, unsure what to say, and murmured a simple thank you. His voice came out rough and used. From that day on, money became rare between them. Juana brought pastries that didn't sell, a sandwich wrapped carefully in foil, bottled water when the sun burned too hot. Sometimes she would sit on the edge of the curb for a moment, just long enough to ask if he was okay before customers pulled her back to her shop. Their conversations were small, almost fragile. "How's your day been?" "Cold." "Eat slowly. It's hot." Sometimes there were no words at all, just shared silence, broken by the sound of traffic and the distant hum of the city. Yet those quiet moments carried more meaning than any conversation Kwan-Woo had ever known in his former life. He began to look forward to her footsteps, to the way she tucked loose strands of hair behind her ear when she was nervous, to the way her smile reached her eyes, even on days when hers were tired, to the way she never asked questions that would embarrass him. She treated him like he mattered. One afternoon, Juana noticed his hands shaking as he tried to open a bottle. Without thinking, she reached out and twisted the cap for him. Her fingers brushed his skin, brief, accidental, innocent. But for Kwan-Woo, it felt like an earthquake. No woman had touched him without wanting something in return for years. No cameras. No expectations. No demands. Just human contact. That night, as he lay awake on cold concrete, memories of his old life flooded his mind. Silk sheets, guarded rooms, women laughing too loudly at his jokes. None of it felt real anymore. None of it compared to the quiet warmth of a paper bag placed beside him by a woman who barely had enough for herself. Meanwhile, Juana began to notice things too. The way he listened more than he spoke. The way his posture didn't match his appearance. The intelligence behind his tired eyes. Sometimes she caught him watching her shop, not with desire, but with something deeper, respect. She didn't know why she felt drawn to him. She only knew that when she walked back across the street, her chest felt lighter. The world seemed a little less cruel. Neither of them spoke of love. Neither of them spoke of truth. Yet something invisible was forming between them. Strong, fragile, and dangerous. For the first time in years, Kwan-Woo wasn't being seen as a king, a threat, or a wallet. He was simply a man. And for Juana, that was enough. For now. As days slowly turned into weeks, the lie Kwan-Woo wore like armor began to feel heavier than any crown he had ever carried. What once felt like protection now pressed against his chest with every breath. Juana had grown more comfortable around him. She talked while standing beside him now, sometimes leaning against the pole near the bus stop, sometimes sitting briefly on the curb when business was slow. Her words flowed easily, soft, honest, unguarded. She spoke about her mother, about the hospital rooms that smelled like disinfectant and worry, about the fear of missing rent, about sleepless nights spent counting money that was never enough. She spoke about her dreams too, quiet ones she never said out loud to anyone else. Owning a real shop someday, seeing her mother healthy again, living a life where kindness didn't feel like a weakness. Each word cut deeper. Kwan-Woo listened, nodding, offering gentle responses, hiding the storm building inside him. Every laugh she shared tightened his chest. Every smile made the lie more unbearable. Because the more she trusted him, the more dishonest he felt. At night, when the streets grew quiet and Juana returned home exhausted, Kwan-Woo stepped back into the shadows of his real world. Only briefly, and only from a distance. He made a call, then another. Without revealing his location or identity, he ordered his accounts to quietly cover Juana's mother's hospital bills. The medications, the treatments. He paid months of overdue apartment rent in advance, making sure it appeared as anonymous assistance. No name, no trail, no explanation. He watched from afar as small miracles unfolded. The hospital bills stopped piling up. The landlord stopped knocking. Juana's mother began receiving better care. Juana was confused, grateful, and overwhelmed. But she never suspected the quiet man across the street. And still, the world remained cruel to her. Her friends whispered. Her relatives mocked her. They laughed at her small shop, her worn clothes, her refusal to chase wealthy men or easier paths. They called her foolish for being kind, weak for staying poor. Kwan-Woo heard it all. And every time they mocked her, he responded in the only way he could, silently, decisively, from behind the curtain. He ordered opportunities to disappear from those who humiliated her. He ensured the businesses that ridiculed her lost contracts. He corrected every injustice quietly, never stepping into the light. He stood behind her, always unseen, always protecting. Yet the more he did, the more conflicted he became. Because Juana didn't love him for what he did in secret. She loved him, or was beginning to, for who she believed he was. A man with nothing. A man with no power. A man who understood her struggle because he lived it. And that truth terrified him. Every day, Kwan-Woo asked himself the same question. How long before the lie destroys everything? Because the moment he revealed who he truly was, everything would change. The way she looked at him. The way she trusted him. The way this fragile, beautiful connection existed. For the first time in his life, Kwan-Woo was afraid. Not of enemies, not of death, not of betrayal, but of losing the only person who had ever loved him without knowing his worth in money. And so he stayed silent. A king without a crown. a protector without recognition, a man falling in love while standing on a lie that was slowly breaking him apart. Juana didn't realize when her concern for him turned into something deeper. It happened quietly, the way all real things do, without warning, without permission. She began to look for him the moment she opened her shop each morning. If he wasn't sitting at his usual spot, her chest tightened until she saw him emerge from the corner, moving slowly, carefully, as if the world had taught him not to expect kindness. Only then would she relax. When people mocked him, she stepped forward without hesitation. "Leave him alone," she said once, her voice shaking but firm, when a group of men laughed and tossed insults his way. "He's done nothing to you." They scoffed, called her foolish, warned her to stay away from people like him. Juana didn't care. She stood between them and the man everyone dismissed, her small frame shielding him as if courage could outweigh fear. Kwan-Woo had faced guns, threats, and enemies without flinching, but watching her defend him left him shaken in ways violence never could. Trouble came one afternoon when city officials arrived, ordering him to leave the area. Juana argued with them, insisting he wasn't bothering anyone, that he was peaceful, that he deserved to exist there as much as anyone else. When they finally left, frustrated and annoyed, Juana sat beside him, her hands trembling. "I won't let them hurt you," she said quietly. Those words echoed in Kwan-Woo's chest long after she walked back to her shop. She began bringing extra food, saving the best pastries for him. She talked to him about her day, her worries, her mother's improving health, never once questioning the strange blessings that had begun to appear in her life. She laughed more now, and every laugh felt like a knife and a gift at the same time, because Kwan-Woo knew the truth. He knew that the love growing in her heart had nothing to do with power or wealth. She loved the man she believed was homeless, broken, ordinary. She loved his silence, his patience, his presence. Not the king, not the mafia boss, not the empire he controlled. Just him. At night, guilt followed him like a shadow. He replayed every moment she stood up for him, every smile she gave freely, every risk she took just by being seen with him. She was giving him something priceless, trust, and he was giving her a lie. Still, when she sat beside him and leaned slightly closer, when her shoulder brushed his arm and neither of them pulled away, Kwan-Woo felt something he had never felt in all his years of power. Peace. For Juana, love didn't need answers. For Kwan-Woo, love had become a countdown. Because the more she loved the man she thought he was, the more devastating the truth would be when it finally came. And yet, standing beside her in the fading light of the street, Kwan-Woo knew one thing with painful clarity. She loved him with nothing to gain, and that made her the most dangerous and precious thing he had ever known. The day the mask fell did not arrive gently. It came with sirens in the distance, black cars stopping too close to the curb, and men who did not belong to the street Juana knew so well. Their presence alone changed the air, heavy, dangerous, wrong. Juana noticed first. She was arranging pastries when she saw them. Well-dressed men with cold eyes, scanning the street like hunters who had finally found their prey. Her heart skipped when she followed their gaze. It led to him. Before she could cross the street, one of the men grabbed Kwan-Woo roughly by the arm. The disguise shattered instantly. The homeless beggar straightened, his posture shifting, his eyes turning sharp. No longer tired, no longer small. Power returned to him like a shadow snapping back into place. "Boss," one of the men said, voice low with respect. Juana froze. The word echoed louder than the traffic, louder than her thoughts. "Boss?" She watched in disbelief as the men apologized, explaining they had finally tracked him down, that enemies were closing in, that staying exposed was no longer safe. Then one of them turned to her. "Miss, you need to step back. You don't know who you're standing next to." The truth hit her like a physical blow. The man she fed, the man she defended, the man she loved, was not homeless, was not powerless, was not who he claimed to be. Black cars, armed men, whispered warnings, a mafia boss. Juana felt her legs weaken as the world she trusted collapsed around her. Tears burned her eyes, not from fear, but from betrayal. Every smile, Every quiet moment, every shared silence suddenly felt poisoned. "You lied to me," she said, her voice breaking. "Every day." Kwan-Woo turned to her, panic in his eyes. Not fear of his enemies, but fear of losing her. He dismissed the men with a single command and stepped closer, hands shaking for the first time since she'd known him. "Yes," he admitted quietly. "Elite." The street felt too small for the truth that followed. He told her everything. About his wealth, his power, the betrayals that taught him love always came with a price. The women who loved his money, not his soul. The emptiness that followed every relationship. "I needed to know," he said, his voice raw. "If someone could love me when I had nothing. If love could exist without fear, without greed, without power." He told her why he chose that street, why he stayed, why he watched her kindness before he ever spoke to her. "And when you gave me food," he whispered, "when you defended me, when you loved me without knowing who I was, I knew I'd found what I'd been searching for." Juana listened through tears, anger and heartbreak warring inside her chest. "You took my choice away," she said. "You let me believe something that wasn't real." "Yes," he said again. "And I would accept it if you walk away." The men waited. The danger waited. The world held its breath. Juana looked at him. The same eyes, the same voice, the same man who had listened to her dreams, who had protected her in silence, who had stood behind her when everyone else mocked her. The lie was real, but so was the love. Slowly, painfully, Juana made her choice. "I don't love your money," she said. "I don't love your power. I love the man who sat on that street and treated me like I mattered." Her voice trembled, but she stood firm. "You were wrong to lie, but I choose you regardless." Kwan-Woo broke. For the first time, the king bowed not to power, not to fear, but to love. The mask had fallen. The truth had wounded them both. But in choosing each other anyway, they proved something stronger than lies existed between them. Love, real love, was never about how it began. It was about what survived the truth. Kwan-Woo was prepared to walk away from everything. From the empire he built with blood and discipline. From the power men feared and obeyed. From the world that had shaped him into a king. If protecting Juana meant losing her, he was ready. But Juana surprised him, just as she always had. Instead of running from his world, she chose to see it. The day he brought her into his life for the first time, Juana felt like she was stepping into another universe. Black cars lined up in silence. Doors opened before they were touched. People lowered their heads in respect. Wealth surrounded her in ways she had only seen in movies. Yet none of it intimidated her. She walked beside him calmly, her hand in his, her heart steady. She wasn't dazzled by the luxury. She wasn't blinded by the power. She was there for him. Kwan-Woo watched her closely, waiting for fear, doubt, regret. None came. He introduced her to his family, the people whose approval had always been measured in status, bloodlines, and strength. Juana stood before them with quiet confidence, respectful but unafraid, her kindness unchanged by the grandeur around her. They saw it immediately, not her clothes, not her past, not her lack of wealth. They saw her heart. For the first time, Kwan-Woo's family welcomed someone not because of what she brought, but because of who she was. They embraced her warmly, calling her brave, genuine, and rare. His mother held Juana's hands and thanked her for loving her son when the world had hardened him. Juana's life changed, but not the way people expected. She moved into warmth instead of worry, security instead of fear, peace instead of survival. Yet she remained the same woman who sold ice cream, who fed a stranger, who loved without conditions. And then came the night that silenced every doubt. Under crystal lights and a sky glowing with celebration, Kwan-Woo stood before her at a luxurious engagement party surrounded by friends, family, and music that echoed joy instead of power. When he knelt and opened the velvet box, the diamond inside caught the light, brilliant, flawless, undeniable. But it was his voice that shook. "I searched the world with everything," he said, "and found love only when I had nothing." He asked her to be his wife, not as a king claiming a queen, but as a man asking the woman who saved his soul. Juana said yes through tears. The applause was thunderous, and somewhere in the crowd stood the faces from her past. The ones who had mocked her, humiliated her, laughed at her poverty. Now they returned with bowed heads, apologies heavy with regret, begging for forgiveness they never deserved. Juana looked at them quietly. Then she turned away, because she was no longer defined by their cruelty or her struggle. She was loved. She was chosen. She was home. Two wounded hearts had found each other where money had no voice and power meant nothing. And in choosing love over fear, truth over pride, they discovered something richer than gold. A love that survived everything. Thanks for watching Folktales by Queen Dora. For more interesting stories, please click on the subscription button.